what can we do, or what does this mean for us, right? There's a bunch of data, a lot of information that's happened. What does this mean for you and me sitting in this room? What this means is they're not paying as much as we are. We are recouping all of that in the white. So before, we're flip-flopping what we're paying versus what the city is paying, which is significant. These are things that are affecting our schools, our infrastructure, what we're able to get the most bang for our buck on. So Michael's gone really in depth into the history of it. I've read the report. I know a lot of people here in this room have. There are some repeat people. You'll notice some of the names in the report are people that we know in town that are elected officials, or they're on zoning boards, planning boards. So it's a really interesting report. I mean, I graduated high school in 2006 while all of this was going on, and we had no idea. So your tax assessment can be higher than the city of Providence's. You're not being frozen like the city of Providence is. So again, the greater burden on the town for infrastructure and so forth, but it's also a loss of local control. So the city is purchasing land. They're buying up what they can for land. It can get frozen. They're not paying as much for taxes. And then also, did you know that the fire department here in town, that's something that we lease from the city of Providence. We don't own that land. That's something that we have to work through. In recent past, they tried to shut down Elmdale Road, so the section between Route 6 and Route 101, which is a major thoroughfare for EMS. That was a major controversy in town. Things like at the financial town meeting recently, I read from this report in defense of the $75,000 that was defunded, that we need these experts that the city has that we don't have. So there was money that was going to be taken away from that we won and then we lost. So are we going to win this time, or are we not going to win this time? And funding things like that and having reports like this makes us be able to have a stronger angle at the bargaining table. It was also discussed at the financial town meeting that, well, we have one legislator, which is true. We have one state rep, we have one state senator, and that we really can't do anything. No one really cares about this within the state. I mean, they do. 60% of the state's water supply comes from us. If they don't have us, then they don't drink water. And it's things like the Kent County Water Authority. They also purchase water from us. The town of Johnston, just like the litigation we talked about with Judge Silverstein, that was significant and went back to these laws that were created 100 years ago about our town. So it's important things that we need to be continuing to work with our representative and our senator about. The only piece of legislation that was introduced this year in the General Assembly was that we would get 5% of the monies from the water sales back into our town, which that can't happen anyways. The PUC, that's not how it works. That the Public Utilities Commission would never allow that. That's all our state rep did. And that legislation was actually revoked at the request of the representative, so that's the only piece of legislation we got here.
You just bring up a good point. So there's also a misconception that Providence Water Supply Board is huge and they're rich and they can just raise their rates to take care of any tax increase that the town may put on. That's not true. They're regulated like anyone else, so they have to get any rate approval from the Public Utilities Commission. So they can't. If we raise our tax rates, they can't just say they can't do it instantaneously. They can't just say, well, our cost just went up and therefore we need to raise the water rates. It doesn't happen. They have to file what they call a notice, and then it's a whole process to go to raise the rates. That goes back to why it's important to have a tax treaty, because they know what their costs are going to be for the next 5 years, and they can plan their rates upon their fixed cost of tax property. So that is that's an important point. People ask me, also what would I do? I'm not an elected official, but obviously we have 1,000 acres of property that was taken off for the last 10 years that they bought. You've taken off by the development rights too. So that's easy pickings, right? There's a value there that they haven't paid taxes on at least 1,000 acres for the last 10 years. That's pretty easy. And they've also put, I think, $70 million into their water plant. The water plant is a commercial structure. that's not off the tax roll. I mean, it's part of this agreement. But like again, if you put a deck on your house, you're going to pay the next value, the next assessment. Well, they put in pumps and they put in the new structure and whatnot. The value of that building has gone up. I don't know how much, but they put $70 million into it. So there's another area there where you might be able to get some more money.
They just said did capital improvements there. It was a 5-year capital improvement program. I think it ended in like 2014 or something like that. But like, so are we able to tax on those capital improvements?
Well, not in the agreement, because any capital improvement they had in the agreement, any kind of increase in the value of the land, the property, or the tangible property, the building itself is frozen.
For how long?
12 years now. So at the end of next cycle. But then once that agreement expires, there would be a possibility to get some of that value.
So can you go back?
No, never go back, because it was part of the agreement.
But
They could go back.
But also to answer your question, if we jump ahead 2 slides, I went on Providence Water Supply Board. They do an audit every year. They're an organization, they're a business, right? So they have to report their assets and they have to report their liabilities. So on their asset side, in reporting, specifically land, building, and improvements, because they have a lot of assets, between 16 and 17, they did their own internal audit. There was a 12% increase in overall value. So you can't get all that stuff in arrears, but just that 1 year's quick snapshot showed a 12% increase. Jump to expenditures to look at what they're outpaying in taxes, the next slide. From 16 to 17, they only had a 2% increase in their taxes because of that frozen perspective, right? So, and I don't know about you, but I had a greater than 2% increase on my land in taxes in the 16 and 17 evaluation reassessment.
So the timeline you're talking about, 12 years, when does that end?
Next year, next December.
So then you have to sit down at the
It
table.
might be this December, sorry, this December.
Right, so then you have to sit down at the table and renegotiate that tax.
Yeah, the town council appointed a committee, I think Mayor Tim, Brendan Frederickson, I think the council president, Mr. Brady, just walked in, hello, Mr. Brady. Apparently, I guess they're negotiating, they're the negotiating committee. Again, I wasn't at that meeting, but I think they're the negotiating committee. That's kind of important. Yeah.
When we do this negotiating, is there any, the farm forest and open space thing, is that forever?
Well, it's a good point. So if you read the agreement that they entered into, they basically say the town will agree to, they'll agree to designate the land for forest open space, again, during the duration of the agreement. But then they kind of say, well, but each party reserves the right to challenge it or appeal it or something, basically start again. And I just don't know how you do that because we have a written decision, or if the court's not going to ignore what they've already decided. Now, whether they can do an appeal 12 years later to the Supreme Court, whether they got it right, that's a good legal question. I don't know. Usually you have to appeal within a reasonable amount of time of the decision. But the agreement was we're not going to appeal, and you kind of reserve the right to kind of, we're going to leave that alone, basically. One thing I want to say is, when I was on the town council, and Wayne and I, Salisbury and I didn't agree on much, but we agreed on this. We always believed that the value of that, you couldn't just come up with a number that Providence Water Supply Board wanted to pay for taxes. In other words, we believe it needs to be linked to something. And we believe that it needs to be linked to the value of the land. In other words, you can't negotiate, in my opinion, for a new tax treaty unless you know what the value of their land really is, or what the building really is. And I just found out that during this last evaluation that we went through, that the Providence Water Supply Board land was not reassessed by Division Appraisal. They were
The ones that we assessed up?
Right, exactly. They weren't, right? So they were.
They're not equipped to do that.
Well, they weren't equipped for that. They weren't. And then the previous town council hired a specialty company to assess the land and the building and whatnot. And I don't know what the status of that is. I don't know if the town's gotten that. Miss Karen Beaton told me that she hadn't seen it, but I don't know. But so that's an important document to have because I think it's very, very dangerous to link a tax rate without knowing what the value is. Because you could agree $6 million, well, the land may be worth $400 million, Sorry.
I don't have the vocabulary to break this down, but can't the water be considered invaluable? I mean, given how we're looking, we've got real estate in the air and all that, can't something be created about
So
water?
you tax the water. Right.
The fact that we don't have water, we don't live.
Right. No, well, true. I guess I
Can I speak about it? So
In the city of Providence, there's been talk about monetization of water, which is kind of what you're talking about. Mayor Aborza was trying to sell off the asset of the reservoir, and that died in the General Assembly this year because Mayor Aborza decided it was a lost cause for him. And this has happened in the past. Mayor Cianci also tried to sell off the water system. There's been legislation about regional water boards and things like that. I think your question is about monetization, like can we sell water at a profit?
No,
Okay.
I think it's more the way society has evolved.
Right.
Water, it's a life-giving element. I mean,
Right.
whereas
Value
before, nobody really was looking at that from that perspective.
Right.
That can't that be of value? I mean, like no other utility, that is important. I don't know, I just.
So the Public Utilities Commission is, the PUC is really the governing body on how much can you charge, what's reasonable to charge. They also regulate gas and electric, your internet bill, your cell phone bill. So these are public utilities for the public good. And that would be a good like moral and ethical question of can we charge? There have been people who have discussed, well, why can't we charge 5 cents per gallon on this? And things like that, but it hasn't.
What do they do with oil?
So
Like,
what?
would water be like oil is to?
So heating oil, like diesel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a little that isn't regulated at the PUC levels like public utilities are. One could debate, could you sell off a gallon of water like you do home, heating oil or the diesel that you pick up at, your local gas station? That would be something that would be a huge change and shift in our society, though. I don't know.
But it's more of a reality now.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go without electricity, we could
Right.
go with all the other utilities, it's just one, water.
So what we're seeing for most municipalities is that they're actually doing the opposite, that they're saying water shouldn't be sold at a profit because it's so precious to us that we wouldn't survive without it. So like Baltimore, they have made an ordinance that you can't sell water for more than really what the cost of it, the cost of doing business. So I would be surprised if somebody did the reverse, which would be, to sell it at a profit or to get more money out of it because we need it, which I think is what you're asking.
So, well, I'm just trying to.
Right.
So the water comes off the land that they own, so the water's theirs. It's not our land, it's not ours, they own the water, they own the water. We just don't tax, it's a value to water, no question, it's some kind of value. Certainly when there was mills on the river. Right, certainly when there was mills on the river, that water was valuable because that turned the turbines, that turned the water wheels, so there was some value to that, but we don't tax it. The Rhode Island statute doesn't set up a system where you tax the value of the water, it's all kind of intrinsic to the land.
Since it's politics, water is just a natural element, and like before politics, people were using it, without being monitored. I guess, is there a way somehow in the politics of it all, give it more value? That's all I'm saying. I don't know.
Possibly.
Idealistic.
But we don't really give value to any environmental resource, really. So that's a problem in itself. But you have, Sean, you said that the PWSB, they're a business, right? You call them a business. So what is their profit? Are they profiting off of this?
They aren't allowed to make a profit
So what
because of the legislation.
are they paid?
Yeah, so they have employees, they have infrastructure costs, they have electric costs,
They use those funds to rebuild their equipment and like any type of business. Yeah.
there was a time that they were allowed to make
But
profit on water.
But they do aggregate cash, I guess is your point. They're not a non-profit. If there's something left over on the bottom line, it goes into their.
For them. I mean, if you go back to that graph that you showed where the tax base was there and then all of a sudden it shifts to whatever, look at that. I mean, why, like how do they justify into that, like going down over time? Like what made that go down over time since like 1940 or?
Well, so from 1928 to about 1960, the town population was about 2,000, right?
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of land out there to develop. So over time, their land kind of stayed steady the value, but as people developed and built houses in Scituate, obviously land values went up, so everyone's land value went up. So their assessment would naturally drop a little bit because other values have gone up.
Oh, so that's what you're showing.
So, well, I mean, that's part of it, but I'm just showing, so there would have been a shift.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until 1977 that the tax bill actually increased to over $1 million, so, that's not that long ago. So now it's, I think.
So our needs became more as well as a town.
Our needs became more, and because our population is
Yeah.
growing, the value of people who develop the land became also more. So raw land undeveloped became less valuable.
And in the meantime, Providence is having financial strife, and it just keeps happening over and over again. So they have
But to your point, it doesn't behoove them as a business to just relinquish their profits to pay more in taxes just because if they're responsible, if they're on board, they're going to want to hold costs, right?
Yeah, so there's
It's
like
a fight.
an weird, like, it's just such a weird thing to have.
Jen, did you?
So it's really, really critical that we're prepared when this comes up, correct?
That's the most
So,
critical.
so what do we know about the timeline of this and how long before this? We are not going to wait till December when it happens, are we? Are we planning ahead to, set the stage for whatever experts we're going to have? We know that we've talked about how the police stations have to be situated because they have to get around the reservoir to get where they need to go, how the school buses have to go. Have we planned anything for this that you know of to get ready for this negotiation?
Yeah, that would be, so I have put in access to public records requests, asking, what we can see as far as correspondence, if the city has reached out to the town or anything like that. I know that many of us have gone to the meetings in Providence and we've had this, oh yes, we have a great relationship with the town of Scituate. I don't know if I really believe that. It's kind of a frustrating thing that it's something you would have to ask your elected officials. I know as soon as my APRA requests come back, it's been 20 days, 30 days actually. I'd be glad to share those with you, Jan.
Yeah.
I know
So there's no reason for really the Providence Water Supply Board to come to us to try to negotiate because they've got a really free ride right
Except the
now.
agreement expires, so they need to know what their costs are going to be.
And they will need to be able to go to the PUC and say, hey, we need an increase. So, and to go back to things like what are they paying for the city of Providence, they have lead in their pipes. So we all know the water is great. We drink it too through aquifers. But the lead pipe system in Providence is bad. There are people who have gotten lead poisoning. And so the city of Providence through Providence Water, which works hand in hand with the Providence Water Supply Board, they are working on financing programs to help people pay for new piping. That money has to come from somewhere. It comes from ratepayers. Ratepayers, the rates get changed through the PUC. Another thing is, I might be being petty, but why do we have fluorescent lighting, the irrigators on 116? Is that really necessary that they have to maintain that for the betterment of, that's how petty I can be. But those are things, it looks great, and actually that system, when it was first created, was the first of its kind in the country. So we have some really great technology here, but what is the city really using their money on? I don't know, and that's why we need to be able to have experts with that $75,000 that the taxpayers decided to add on to the budget a couple of weeks ago. That's why I went up and said, hey, what's the plan? Because they have a plan on the other side, but do we really have a plan on the other side?
Obviously, we've been to the water supply meetings and we've seen the lobbyists and everybody else that's been in there. So we know they're very prepared.
Right.
So if the situation had been that they got this, that whatever these lobbyists, whoever they were representing, were able to lease that land and lease the water supply board as a business, what would have happened to the tax rate if that had happened? Would we still be held to that?
Yeah, well, the agreement would expire, but again,
Would they have been able to
Yeah.
get that special rate as well?
I think the agreement doesn't allow it to be assigned. I think the agreement says it can't be assigned to another entity. But the reality is, other than the state owning it, and I know people get confused about this, if the state were to take it over, there would be no taxes due to the town of Scituate because you can't tax the state. That's just just doesn't happen. You don't tax state property. But if a private developer like Suez came out and bought the reservoir, they're like, it would be if someone like leased your house. Just because someone's leasing your house, even though you still own the house and someone's leasing it, that the person who's leasing your house still has to pay taxes on that property.
Right,
So-
because when it's a business leasing, they have to pay.
Exactly. So yeah, but it would all depend on, but the agreement would, obviously that would be probably a fixed cost that the person who's leasing the reservoir would want to know how much taxes we're going to, pay.
So, but would any of those agreements still be held, is what that's what I'm asking. Would they still be able to
Well,
get that rate on the
I don't know if
$200 or whatever it was that you
well, it's not
said?
based on $200, to be fair. I mean, it's not, but that's what they hold over our head. And if we really want to push this, we can go to $200 an acre. So, but that, but they got the designation. They won for the designation, and now it's just kind of the balance and where we're going to, Listen, it comes back to the 1928. We're really in a new position than we were in 1928. What's fair, right? What's a reasonable assessment, and how much and what's the value of this
Right.
property, and how much burden do we have?
When it comes down to it, that's the biggest piece of leverage that we have,
Right.
is the valuation of the land.
Valuation.
Michael, why, again, my question, what would be the legal advantage to stipulating to open space when you could argue the value of the land and the riparian rights that go along with that land? If you look at the map, I don't think it's a coincidence that all the area around, completely surrounding the reservoir is owned by Providence Water Supply Board. Therefore, they have all the riparian rights that go with that land. That's not normal open space. That is the reservoir, and you have riparian rights that go with that land. Why wasn't that not argued? Why wouldn't that be argued in the future? Because certainly it's inequitable.
So it's always easy to look back at a case when the kids are deciding, right? So.
Well, they stipulate.
And
Why would you stipulate to the elephant in the room?
I can't answer that. I can tell you this. Providence Water Supply Board in 1985 filed the same application for farm forest open space. And they brought it to the local board of assessment at that point. Right, so this was the second time they did it. They did it in 1985 as well. And the local board also basically moved against them. But at that board, they also stipulated that it met the definition of forest land as well. So that decision was rendered. Providence Board never appealed that decision, and they came to an agreement from 1985 until 2000, right? But what changed between 1985 and 2000 was this recommended value that came out of the State Properties Committee, that the recommended value for what you get from forest open space is about $250 an acre. Now think about it from a fairness perspective. So my family owns about 40 acres of land where I live, okay?
Yeah.
I put in an application, my family put an application for farm forest open space.
Yeah.
It was granted because it's 40 acres, continuous, whatever, meets the definition. My assessment is $200 an acre on that 40 land. It's land lot that can't be developed, whatever, but that's my assessment.
Yeah.
So if you have another landowner in town, happens to be the biggest landowner, how can you say that, well, I'm going to get the $200 assessment rate, but you're not, if it's the same forest land? I mean, what's fair is fair, right? The law is supposed to apply equally.
You don't have riparian rights with your land.
I have a pond. But yeah, I do. But I'm just saying, but I get it. But I'm just saying, I would have never, if I was, again, I wasn't part of it, but I would have never stipulated that we automatically, I would have had to make them prove
Exactly.
that met the definition of forest land.
Well, doesn't that mean that the appeal should proceed then? If you do look back on something and you say, well, we actually could have done better in arguing this case.
I'm not sure the court would have came out the same way, but I just wouldn't have given that up, because to me, that's the court issue.
If this is ending and we have a chance to appeal this decision,
If,
at least certain acres, I mean, maybe the negotiation should be that, there's too many acres that they're claiming into this.
Yeah.
It's
That they're.
Well, that was one of the arguments that they made.
Too much.
So one of the arguments that they made was, hey, we don't really need all that land, because filtering systems have advanced so much.
That's not true.
Well, that's what they said. So we don't really need to buy all this land. So and people think that once they own the land, they can't sell it off. They can sell it off, and they can be developed. That land
Who
can
would
be sold off.
say that when you know anything about environmental science?
I'm just telling you what they said.
They're engineers, they don't know anything. So, no, I'm sorry, they're not looking at it, like, if you took all of the trees down that surround the reservoir, and you just had traffic and houses and whatever, do you know how much pollution would go into the waterway?
Yeah.
So they have to invest even more into their system.
But I could challenge that too, Anna, with that there are other water systems in other states that they do have residential, it's zoned a little, I I appreciate the environmental science aspect of it, but there are other communities that have public water sources that do have houses closer to the water source than we do.
But
So-
if it's serving 60% of the state,
I mean, the Quabbin Reservoir,
they don't have,
but it's not
they're
as,
huge, they're
Right.
so big.
right.
And they don't have a town, like, it, you know,
But
unfortunately.
Mansfield Hollow, you can go fishing on the
Well,
hollow.
I do think that we
Yeah.
should have recreation rights.
We did at one point when they first did it.
Yeah.
We had recreation.
If they're
and
gonna
people
keep this
used
much
it.
land locked around us as a town, I mean,
That's
I
what
know,
happened, yes.
Yeah.
if they wanna negotiate too, I wish that whoever's negotiating would.
You here for the buffet or you got a question?
Well, I got a question instead. Who owns the Providence Water Supply Board? Because that's a $64 question that's been flying around for the last.
So that's a good question. There's a legal theory out there based on a decision that I think the province solicited back in the 1930s or 40s, that the Providence Water Supply Board is owned by the ratepayers because they paid for it, right? So, and you know, that's kind of out there. There's no definitive. Who really owns it? My argument would be, that's a good argument. The counter argument would be Providence owns it. They were given the statutory authority to buy the land in their name. They own it.
It's not a publicly owned utility, so there's an argument either
But
way.
the city doesn't own, the city divorced themselves from the
The
PWS.
Providence Water Supply Board is an agency of the city of Providence.
Is there any
Clear.
other town that is
Clearly.
like this?
Huh?
Is there any other town, city in the US that is situated? Or that has a water supply board like this, that has a town that sits in the middle of it, like that?
Yeah, I'm sure there
Because
must.
the
I don't know.
Quabbin, they just flooded the town.
I experienced it in Woonsocket reservoirs are in North Smithfield.
They're really
Come on.
So Michael, we have to consider too, when we do this valuation of the land, the costs should be presented as well by experts, the extra cost, what would it cost?
Extra cost for what?
For everything that we do, for the fire department, for the, for the police
School,
department, for getting the buses around around. And the other side of this is, we've seen some horrible disasters in the other sides of the country with forest fires. And I go by that reservoir and drive down 116, and there's no forest management going on in there whatsoever, which leaves us all at a really, really terrible risk.
They would dispute that. They would say that they're actually managing it. They might not be pretty.
They're not managing it. There's dead wood everywhere, and granted, we've had a lot of rain, but we've seen what happens, and this is like really scary looking to me. There's so much just left and dried out. It's like
There's two things that I can add to that conversation. The reservoir, this is how dirty I am about this. It was actually, red pine was surrounding the reservoir. It was imported from, I believe, Michigan, and it's not native to here. And then it got a blight because it's not native to here. And so that's why about 10, 15, 20 years, and Tom, you probably know this too, the blight happened, and they had to repopulate with white pine. So they do pay attention to an extent what's going on, and then 9/11 happened, and so that was significant. We became this bustling area of here's this major water supply, what happens if something happens to it? So there have been moments in our history where the city or Providence Water has taken it seriously, but I'm not really sure how serious they are about it.
So I mean, that's got to be taken into consideration when we do these negotiations as
Right.
well. I mean, there should be some kind of responsibility to this town as to how they're managing that, because that's just one big firebox waiting to go off.
Well, that's like with Elmdale Road. If you cut off Elmdale Road from Route 6 to 101,
Right.
that's a huge thoroughfare for EMS. And the city wanted to close that road, or they wanted the town to close that road because there's no houses on it. So that's going back to response times and things like that we have a lot of fire departments because you can't get from Potterville to here quickly.
Right.
You have a question there?
Yeah, I was just, actually, I'm from Providence, but I'm not happy about what they're doing, or what they were trying to do, which the Lord's a husband. But I was just wondering, are the things that, because of the politics in Providence and the lack of monetary resources that the city is really supposedly struggling, Are they negligent in other areas? And then what about this nuclear plant that's coming up? Is that a threat to the quality?
You mean the power plant in Burrillville?
Yeah, the one where the Johnston's allowed to.
Yes, that's actually in Burrillville. That's a fracked gas and diesel plant. So that's another pet project of mine, is the steam vendor plant.
Threaten us, but it's
Yeah.
a threaten our water.
Yeah.
And just because Providence is in the crisis it's in, and now I see because of this 10-year maturation, what's going on in Providence is going on right now, and why they wanted to take the water and marry it with a debt that's never going to be paid off. I just wondered if the city of Providence is really keeping that up the way it should, if it's meeting quality standards. Do you have somebody that's kind of overseeing it, making sure that Providence is meeting what it's agreed on, or has that kind of gotten slack and nobody's...
$75,000 to manage a negotiation this large is like you just handed somebody $10.
So just so you know, the cost of this litigation from the beginning of 2000 to 2006 and 2007 cost the town $500,000.
Of course it did.
That's how much we paid.
And that's how
Now, there was a lot of litigation, so litigation's kind of over, but that was lawyers' fees and expert fees and whatnot. Obviously, from my perspective, again, the assessment of that land is very important, because I think you need to tie. You can't just divorce what the tax bill is from the assessment. There's got to be some link, even if you give them a discount. There's got to be some link to the value of the land. Of course, they're going to resist that because over time they know that the value of the land is going to go up. And obviously, if you have more assessment, you want more taxes. So you got to kind of balance that. But there's a lot to go there.
Just one second. To go back to your question though, what is the city of Providence doing? I think that the city council has really started to think differently about the water source. I'm not sure what ward you're in.
We've had a lot of changes in the city of Providence.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how much the individual council people are really expertise in this.
Yes.
So
I
I think things are up for grabs, and it's sort of, I'm worried because I grew up in Western Cranston, and there was a lot of respect for the reservoir.
Right. So the city, you're right, the city council has changed a lot. I know that there are a lot of organizations working with the city council on what to do about public resources like the reservoir. So I'm not sure who your ward councilman or woman is.
I'm just saying, I don't think there's a lot of power there right now. Maybe Nick Mattiello, if you go to General
Yeah, so in the
Assembly.
GA it's a little different.
But
So
there's stuff that Providence isn't doing for us as residents. And the Providence Water Committee, water is kind of damaged our property because they dug, and I can still picture my dirt going up the street, and we've got sinkholes and all sorts of stuff, thanks to the Providence Water Commission. So it's just, I almost feel like our city is unstable. I'm not a politician, I'm retired, and I'm just getting interested at an old age. But I just don't think Providence is the threat that you might think it is, and I just think I would just like this reservoir to be treated with respect and get it out of this, as much out of the way from this political foray as it's in. And it's really serious, and we should, as a state, be taking care of this.
right.
And not, kind of traipsing it through it's kind of like dishonorable, putting it into the political realm. And if there's some way, Scituate, thank God for Scituate, all the attorneys and whoever moved out here and bought all this land and business owners and whatever. But it's almost like if it could get stabilized, because this is ridiculous, it's embarrassing, and it's a threat. We're just a tiny state, we're not like Texas. What is the problem?
Right, so that's why there was a recent comment at a town council meeting that people outside of Scituate don't really, this isn't and we can't do anything in town. Here's someone from Providence who's concerned about this, and there are more than just you that are concerned about this. So I've talked with state legislators about this. I know that there are a growing number of Providence legislators who are concerned about this. They're hearing it from their constituents. Not sure what you can talk to as being a former rep, but as far as legislate to fix the political problem you're talking about, fortunately you kind of have to fix it through the GA system if you want to see change, because this is controlled by the General Assembly. They created the reservoir to change the makeup of how the system works, would have to go through the General Assembly as well.
Maybe Nick Manigault, he grew up in Western Cranston. I mean,
Still
maybe
does.
get to the people who know how we used to treat this, all of us that grew up in this area, and how, you know, the boundaries were between the shore and where people were building, and that it be treated respect, and in that way have everything fall into place, because it's just, the way it's being treated, that our mayor was going to put it with the Providence pension system, I'm like, that is, you don't mix those two, you don't put bad debt with profit, because the bad will just drag it down. So it's just, it's not, the perspective is just gone crazy.
Yeah, so it's a great resource. It's a great resource for the city of Providence, a great resource for the state. We all agree with that. I think everybody, no matter where you live, it's a great, we have a great water supply in the state of Rhode Island. The town's perspective is a little different, because we're the host of the reservoir. We obviously have an interest in keeping it pristine, but we also have an interest in getting revenue from it, because the flip side of it is we pay to people who live in Scituate, a great place to live, no one's suggesting that it isn't, but we pay for hosting the reservoir. So we don't have industrial,
I think it's fine. He just
so-
raised our taxes.
Right. So we don't have the ability to raise tax to develop Scituate to the extent that, you know, our costs are increasing too. We have our own pension issue, not as big as Providence. We have our own pension issue. We have school issues. We have things that need. So our largest taxpayer, which is Providence Water Supply Board, you know, I think everyone agrees, no matter what side of the political aisle, you know, they need to pay their fair share. It goes back to what's the fair share. Otherwise, Scituate will have to change, because we cannot afford to keep our town and the services that we have, even though some of them are minimal compared to other towns, based upon the tax base that we have, without them paying a little bit more.
Well, I'd rather my tax
Yeah,
go
I
to
appreciate
Scituate
that.
Reservoir.
Well, you know, it's a water rate that's paying us, not your
Rather
tax.
than the stuff it's going to right now.
Mr.
So I
Durant, you had
encourage
a
it.
question?
Well, I just want to make a comment about, there's 94 square miles of catchment area. That would include Foster, Gloucester, parts of Johnston, and Cranston.
Right.
So when you talk legislatively, I'm sure if you got, you mentioned earlier we got one state rep, one senator. Okay, I get that. But if you talk legislatively and you gather these neighbors, so-called neighbors that are in the catchment area, and get them on board with like some sort of not a plan, but some sort of relief, I think if they see it the same way that the Providence politicians see it, they may climb on board and maybe show that, look, we're part of this too, because Foster is part of that resource area that the reservoir gets its water from, so is Gloucester, more than Johnson and Cranston is. I don't know, probably Western Cranston more than anything.
For folks who aren't from here or are new to town, this area is what the city owns. The entire town of Scituate is part of the watershed. It leads up here into Gloucester, a little bit of Smithfield, Johnston, down here to Cranston and Foster. I think maybe a little bit of Coventry as well. So yeah, I agree that you could make a rural caucus and go up to the state house and say, let's do
The
something.
groundwater from those other communities come into the reservoir, obviously, by natural attrition. So
Yeah.
they have a stake in it a little bit. They don't know it, but they do.
No, I think Representative Chippendale knows. He has co-sponsored some legislation at the State House. Senate District 21 is Scituate, Foster, a lot of Western Coventry, and then a little bit of West Greenwich. I'm not sure what our senator is doing, but he's only one for that entire area. In the past, there has been talk of trying to build that rural caucus. You would have to speak with our representative and ask him why he's only submitted one piece of legislation this year about this that had one co-sponsor.
And the other $64 question, when Providence goes bankrupt, what happens to the water supply board? I mean, when you go ahead forward to trying to get more tax dollars out of it, if they're in bankruptcy court when this all takes place, and obviously the receivership freezes anything, we're kind of like up a tree again, right? But,
I mean, it was taken by eminent domain before. Is it an option for Scituate to reclaim it by eminent domain again?
So the argument the city of Providence has is that the first thing that's going to go, if they do go into receivership or bankruptcy, is the reservoir, that they would sell that off. I'm not sure, I doubt that. I mean, there's the zoo, there's a lot of public property that's there. Would a judge say sell the reservoir off first? We don't know, we don't tell time. That would be a huge undertaking for a receiver to decide. It could happen. The city of Providence is looming over that this is the existential threat that could happen. Is it realistic that that could happen? I'm not a lawyer, but I think that they would try to sell off every other asset before selling.
It would be a process. I think there is too much of the state resources there.
is that, saying that, I know that I'm going out on a limb here, but let's say, for instance, what's his name? Mazzolillo wanted to give him $500 million for it, right? I guess to buy it. He wanted to buy it. He don't want to lease it. He's out of that question of leasing. He wanted to buy it and be part of the NBC, Narragansett Bay Commission. So obviously, I don't know if they have that kind of capital, or he mentioned about the state putting up some bonds so that they could buy it. So now, why can't the town? I know this is going a stretch here. But why can't the town try to make a run at something like that? I know it's a lot of money. I don't know what the life expectancy of the bond can be. Is it 30 years max or 50 years max? I'm not sure. I know it's going to be expensive. However, we could gain something out of it if we had to. Obviously, we'd have to raise the rates. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if it'd be a lot of money. But even if you went up a quarter of a penny and they produce like 90-some billion gallons, 90-some gallons a day, let's see, 96 million gallons a day. That's what they average. Daily demand. So like if you got a quarter of a penny per gallon, that would more than satisfy everybody in the room and then some.
See, this is what you would have an expert prepare. So these are the kind of things that they would come back with.
Right.
So there was a review report, there was a time when we were before the settlement agreement was reached, there was an outreach by the town of Scituate with NBC. It didn't really go anywhere. It's kind of unrealistic, honestly. It's kind of.
It's unrealistic?
I think it's unrealistic because.
You don't think that with
I think if you sold bonds, there'd have to be revenue bonds, and so the revenue from the water supply board would have to pay back the bonds and the ratepayers. It would probably be more costly than what they're paying now. And the politics of it is you have a reservoir that's sort of 60% of the state. You can need general assembly approval for that kind of stuff. You get 60% of people who don't want their rates to increase, basically. So that is the reality of it. So, but there was a little bit of an outreach during, I think, the late.
The thing is, if you look at it like public utilities does with gas and what they do with electricity, they have they put a certain amount of revenue towards like renewable energy and those sort of things, clean energy, clean air, carbon-free stuff, right? Well, as the host town, and I agree with almost everybody in the room that we should get something for the resources that we contribute to the Providence Water Supply Board, albeit the Scituate Reservoir. And also, I think if you got these other towns involved, the catchment towns, and you said to them, look, we get a quarter of a penny, we band together, get a quarter of a penny, we'll give you X, and we'll give Gloucester or Foster X, and so on and so forth. So that, like, now you got a little coalition going. I spoke to Nicholas Maniello about this quite a while ago, and he said it would be a heavy lift, no doubt about it, and he also said that he would be against it because ratepayers would have to approve it, obviously. But even if it's a quarter of a penny, it's still a lot of money. It would probably bring the town about $50 million a year. You'd solve a lot of problems with budgets and police, fire, roads.
Well, the reality is you look at the tax base in Scituate too. I mean, so you're going to increase the rates of water people like in Central Falls and Woonsocket in the city. They don't have a lot of money. But you look at Scituate, oh well, we're all rich up here. We're not rich, but that's the perception. So that's a political issue. But I mean, I just so this is really just more informational. I hope we gave you some things to think about. Negotiations, I guess, are going forward. I don't know if they've actually met with anybody yet. It's just important to kind of just everyone's on the same, understands where we're coming from. There's just a lot of misinformation out there. Again, from my perspective, the low-hanging fruit is getting the value of that 100 acres, 1,000 acres that they bought, and getting some portion of that back on the tax roll. Whether $10,000, $25,000, $100,000, I have no idea what it would be. That's where to start. But obviously, they negotiate too, and they don't want to pay, there's a benefit of having an agreement. There's no question there's a benefit of having an agreement. How much, I'm sure that they see the council president in the back. He'd like to have more money, I'm sure. It's just how much we can squeeze out of them and based on what. I do think that it's important, however, to get the valuation of that land done and figure out how much their things are. Providence Water did their own assessment when they tried to sell it. I think it came about 350, 300 million. That's the whole plant and everywhere they own land and everywhere else. So,
Did you mention earlier about the assessment that was made on them? Was it done by, who was it done by?
so our assessment was done by Vision Appraisal.
What about the water supply board?
They had, it's in the report, I don't remember what it was. It was someone who's well known, but it's also someone who had
How
extra.
far apart were they? Oh.
About 150 million.
So, do you think going forward, they would agree to an independent assessment company or an independent body to go in and do a complete?
Probably not. I mean, I don't know. I doubt it. They'll have the valid assessment, but one of the things because this agreement, the settlement agreement had to be tested, it had to be approved by the PUC as well.
Right.
So this was approved, and at the time I was a councilman, and I testified, as I guess it's a good agreement, basically, as a rep at the time, based upon what we get, given the fact that we lost that case, and I can't emphasize that loss in that case was huge to the town. That was a huge loss. We lost a huge bargaining trip. But one of the criticisms I had about the agreement was there was no mechanism for us to come to an agreement after this agreement expired. In other words, there should have been, in my opinion, there should have been some kind of panel arbitration. So you have to spend all this money on legal fees and experts to
And
figure it
plus,
out.
relationship means a lot.
And relationship means a lot too. I'm friends with this is pure of mine, this is a little younger than me. I'm friends with the chairman of the Water Supply Board guy. His name is Zai, he's a good guy. He's been there for about 5 or 6 years. I talk to him, not regularly, but when I see him downtown and stuff, we want to come to an agreement too. But his argument is, I've got to protect our ratepayers. That's what I'm there to do. And I said, I get that. And people who are elected here are there to protect the taxpayers. So it's a little bit of tension there. But, reasonable amounts are different. We can come to an agreement. We should be able to come to an agreement. But it just, I don't know much. Is the cash cow that everyone thinks it is? No. Is there money to get out of there? Probably some. But it depends. I mean, they do have this fall for open space decision that really whacks us. And that really took the wind out of our sails.
I think they're all nice until they have to make a hard decision.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be fair and equitable for the town of Scituate, obviously, because water's getting scarce. Everybody knows that it's not a commodity that you can really waste, and to have a town get the cold shoulder, really kind of fair to us, because we have no economic development, like you said earlier. There's really nobody is going to build a super mall out here. There's no law.
Well, I mean, honestly, if we can't get more money out of them, then I think that we might have to start looking at what our comprehensive plan looks like, and how we may have to rely on some more development to get some more tax base out of there. I don't know. That's not my decision to
But
make.
those are all temporary fixes, because they use those buildings for 20 years and they abandon them. Look at Walmart. They build.
No, I'm not saying a big box store, but maybe.
I know, but I'm just saying, what other economic development can you bring in? Do you want a sand and gravel company? You want an asphalt plant? I mean, things like that. People are going to be against. You want a trash burner? I mean,
You don't know, but
you're talking companies with big, deep pockets that will spend a lot of money and pay a lot of dollars in taxes, but do you want them in your backyard? I mean, you get the land for it, bad enough.
To your point, Mr. Randy, you look at certain suburbs, you look at cities and towns that have some type of economic development, strip malls or malls, right? Those malls are buildings, and what do you need to bring your customers in? You need land around it to build on blacktop, right? So they can sit there and say, well, don't tax me, and that was a discussion we were having, don't tax me on that blacktop. That's all land because I need it to bring in customers. If I don't have the blacktop, I can't bring in customers. That's how they make money. But they still get taxed on it. Right, in the same way Providence's Water Supply Board's decision, they need the land, don't tax them on it. Yeah, but you should still be paying some level of taxes to some degree.
Fair.
And that's how other towns are making their money.
Just something fair.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's really what the intent of this meeting was. So many people reached out to me, Mike, other members of our committee. What exactly is going on? What is this report? What can we do as a town? What do the tax negotiations look like? So we wanted to present the information, but again, really working with your elected officials, making sure things like the financial town meeting, that was significant. It was the largest talked about subject at that FTM. And it was people talking, saying, well, what are we gonna do? We're just not gonna say anything. And no disrespect to the abilities of our town council, but a town council with no experts versus a city that has some experts, can we at least have some experts so that we can at least have a fair shot here?
We need more than that.
I agree, we need more than that, but we work with what we have. And working with legislators, I do think that there are other members of the GA that have a vested interest in this. If something happens with the Providence Water Supply Board, that means KCWA is probably going to have a vested interest, or our colleagues in the East Bay that they have their own water authorities have a vested interest. Because what happens with this water system, they can go and say to their ratepayers, well, Providence does it, why can't we do it in Bristol, or why can't we do it in Newport or Woonsocket? These are significant things, and they all have emergency connections to one another. Does anyone else have any questions? No, okay.
Thank you.
So-
Coming out.
I'm not, I'm actually saying, the report's online. Actually, I think the exhibits are more interesting than the actual
Yeah.
document. But take a look at it.
So
Any
I
questions?
have a quick little sheet over there if you want to do your name, email address, your zip code, and if you want us to send more information, I don't mind sending a URL. And then next, on the 4th